your story, but don't leave the good parts out.
I am so excited that you're here for many different reasons. I am a huge, huge fan of yours. For anyone who does not know who Cal Fussman is, you're in for a real big treat. And for me personally, as someone who doesn't know what the hell I'm doing interviewing people, I'm so excited. I just thrust myself into this and asking all my friends to come get into some of the deeper questions about life. And I can't think of a better person. You're this is the episode 12 or 13, so you're about 13 episodes late for me to start doing this.
I feel like I'm right on time.
Right on
man.
time. But I've done some research on you, and I want to start the way that I've learned already just from before I met you, which is you say start with the heart. So before we even get into anything, I have a 16-month-old. Can you give me the best or like an amazing memory of one of your toddler years with your kids? An amazing toddler memory to get this whole
How about
thing
a
started.
birth moment?
Oh shit, go there. What do you got?
All right, so my wife is Brazilian,
Yeah.
and she wants the doctors to be like they are in Brazil. In Brazil, everything is looser and everyone's got time. You talk and you relax. And an appointment that we have here that, doctor has you in and out in like 20 minutes. In Brazil, it's like an hour.
Wow.
So my wife just feels uncomfortable with like almost every doctor that she meets in the United States because they're business. And so she says, I think I should have midwives deliver the baby. And, her feeling was that the midwives have the time and they have the inclination to talk things out. They're women, they understand, where the doctors are like clinicians.
Yeah.
And so who am I to say no? This is what she wants, fine. We get the midwives, and the doctor says, look, at like the last moment or whatever, I can come in, but the midwives will get her to this point where the delivery is ready. And so we come on the day and we go to the hospital, and the midwives are there, and my wife's in a lot of pain. And I don't know exactly what happened, but the baby started to come, and when it reaches a certain point, they will not give you an epidural.
Yeah.
Because they basically say, we want you to have the feeling to push the baby out. But if you do the epidural well in advance, okay. So they said, you're too far. So now my wife is hysterically screaming in pain. And I'm just watching all this play out, and the midwives, they just don't seem to have that kind of clinical efficiency that a doctor would. But again, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And my wife is screaming. I'm trying to be as nice as I can. And it's just getting to a point where her pain and her screams, they're like rocking the hospital. And I'm just sensing, they keep telling me the baby's too far on, but the baby's not coming. And I'm starting to look at the midwives, and I'm realizing, they may be a little nervous and not wanting to admit it. And so it just got to the point where I just grabbed one and said, I want the doctor here immediately.
Yeah.
And the doctor arrived, and when the doctor saw what was going on, it was soon there were 6 doctors.
Yeah.
And I guess the way my son was positioned, it was not an easy exit. So it ends up with there are 5 doctors around, one of whom weighed about 350 pounds. And he is pushing down on my wife's belly like from the top, as if she's like a tube of toothpaste that's got to get the toothpaste out, while the doctor has got like a plunger, and he's like trying to fashion the plunger to my son's head. He's trying to plunge out one way. I can't believe I'm laughing at this now, because it was the most terrifying moments of my life.
Yeah.
And to my wife, for my wife. And ultimately, like the plunger works and the toothpaste is squeezed and the baby comes out. And that moment when the baby was like placed in my arms was a delineating moment in my life, because I was a completely different person after what had just happened and having this baby in my arms than I was an hour before.
Yeah.
And well, when you have a kid, you understand that. For me, it was like understanding everything that my father had tried to tell me over the course of my life.
Right there,
yeah, it was like a straight shot. And you are humbled beyond belief.
Yeah.
So just the miraculous nature of birth, but then combined with this like old-fashioned toothpaste squeezing and plungering, and then all of a sudden it's laid in the miracle is laid in your hands, and you realize, oh man, the adventure has begun.
It's amazing. It's really sweet. And that was your first boy?
That was my oldest child. He's a boy. He's now at the University of California, Santa Barbara, finishing up. And then there are two girls after that.
Amazing.
Yeah, and
That's
none of whom had as dramatic an entrance.
intense,
Although the middle child, and I actually feel. Oh, what do I feel? I was about 800 miles away, right around the time the middle one was about to come, and I was getting in a car to drive to get there in time for the birth.
Yeah.
And just before I get in the car, I get the call. We're about ready here. And I said, hold it. I gotta get 800 miles.
Put it back in.
And I'm just moving down the highway as fast as I can. And I had to stop for gas halfway. I think it was like Lawton, Virginia. And I pulled over. Back then, there was no cell phones.
Yeah.
And so you had to find a payphone. And I called in. The baby had already been born.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
And like I'm always wondering, like, why couldn't I have gotten out the day before?
Yeah.
Of course, it might have been 2 days or 3 days.
It's life. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but that ride, that first like 3 hours where I was just scooting through traffic, trying to make it, it is indelibly etched on my memory, because you want to be there for your kids.
Of course, you want to be there. Yeah.
And I wasn't there. But my mom was, and you know what? That probably made it a special experience in a different way.
In a different way for her, especially.
And that child grew up incredibly close to my mom.
Oh, wow.
So
Who
maybe
knows?
that was the way it was supposed
You
to
were
be.
being held back for some reason.
And that's something about life that it takes a parent a while to understand.
Yeah.
Having the patience to wait it out and see that a lot of the crazy shit that comes in front of your eyes actually morphs into something great.
Something great.
But at the time, man, you're out of your head.
So I wanted to ask you, I'm trying to use your tactics of how to interview. I want to learn from you in this hour desperately.
All right.
Which is like, how do you, because you've interviewed all these incredible people, how do you prepare for an interview? Am I doing this right?
You would love this.
I need to know.
No, it's
from
a great
professional
question. It's
how the hell to do
it's
this.
a great question,
Yeah.
and you are going to appreciate it more than 99%. Well, maybe not, because your listeners probably love music, so they're all going to appreciate this.
Yeah. Okay.
I treat it like a jukebox,
Okay.
and I hope everybody remembers what a jukebox is. Like, you can see it on the old-fashioned movies. But it's basically this machine with, in the past, all these vinyl records, singles. So there was actually a song on each side. And they would load it up. Most of the time you see this like in the 50s. And you might see it at a drive-in hamburger joint. When you go inside, there's a jukebox and all the teenagers are around it. And you'd put your coin in, and there would be letters and numbers that were attached to the records. So if you wanted to hear Frank Sinatra singing The Best Is Yet to Come, maybe you hit C39.
Yeah.
And so how does that apply to the way I prepare for an interview and ask questions? Well, what I like to do is create a jukebox of questions in my mind.
Okay.
So before the interview starts, I'll do my research. That includes reading about the subject, maybe magazine stories, might be books they've written. Now, maybe more going on YouTube, seeing a TED Talk they gave, or if they were interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just taking all this in. And then after I learn as much as I can, I sit down with a pad and a pen and just start writing questions. And they're not tactical questions. They're just a channel of my childhood curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll write out, say, 200 questions.
Oh, okay. We're different. First difference. Cool. Go on.
All right, so now I got these 200 questions. That pretty much has come from what I was curious about from the research I did.
Yeah.
Or from things that weren't mentioned in the research, but I was just curious. Now, right before the interview, what I'll do is I will walk around with my 200 questions, and I'll just be reading them to myself, almost like I'm inhaling them in, taking them in by osmosis. And this is where each of these questions is like becoming a single, a musical single that is being layered into the jukebox in my mind. So that by the time I go through this process, I've got 200 singles in my mind waiting to be played. Now, there's a big difference between that jukebox and what's on that pad. Because I could have looked at all those questions and then said, okay, I'll ask this one first and that one second and that one third, and wrote out an order.
All right. So we're different again. Go on.
All right.
That's exactly what I do.
That's what you do.
I'm a
huh?
newbie. I'm figuring
Okay.
But I'm so excited
Hey, you know
for
what?
you to be here.
Hey, you know what? Barbara Walters did it that way. So don't everybody's
I
different.
like what you're doing.
Everybody's
interested.
different. Everybody's different. Barbara Walters would have her questions on like index cards.
Yeah.
And she would basically have tactically planned her interview beforehand. And then if things started going a different way, she was perfectly capable to go with it.
Yeah.
But she liked having that sense of control. Now, what I'm doing is actually, after I take in all these questions, I rip them up. And I rip them up because I want the questions not on a pad. I want them in the jukebox in my head. It's like a symbolic act that the questions are no longer on paper, and that I am not going to think about that paper. Because when I step into that interview, what I want to happen is I want to be prepared to improvise.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people ask, like, what's your first question? Like, I got a magic question in my pocket that is going to open up anybody I talk to. But I don't have that magic question because I treat this like an art. It's like when you're making a song, you don't want to do the same song again in a different form. I remember Bruce Springsteen telling me when he would do concerts, he wouldn't want to play this song that he's played 100 times the same way again. He'd want to do it completely different.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a unique experience every time he went out to do it. And that's how I feel about interviewing. So I come in here and now my power of observation is at work. I am seeing the slide you have in your backyard. And now I know, oh, okay. Who's going down that slide? How old is that child? And I know she's going to make an appearance because we talked a little before we started.
Yeah.
But immediately that's how my head is thinking. And I know that your heart is in that slide. So if my first question is about that slide, which I might not have been prepared for, maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't. But I certainly wouldn't have known you had this sliding pond there. But now I know, and now I'm curious about it. And so maybe my first question is about the sliding pond. Now, that is going to hit you in a very authentic way because you know I could not have been prepared for that sliding pond. So it tells you, I am paying attention to you.
Yeah.
I am curious about you. And once that starts, and once you understand that, you're going to hopefully want to open up. Partly because most people do not feel like they're listened to enough. And so when you encounter somebody who's really curious about you, it gives you a chance to say the things you've always wanted to say. And more than that, if the questions are good and the curiosity is real, you may start saying things you've never thought about before.
Yeah.
And now you're learning about yourself. Now that can become addictive because if you go to a place where you just had a thought about yourself that you never thought before, and maybe you're thinking, that would be a good song.
Yeah.
Now you want the next question because if you just had one idea for a good song, you're thinking, man, maybe we get a whole album out of this. And now you're ready for the next question. And so it's my job at that point to just be curious and stay out of the way and speak as little as I need to because this is your time to talk. And when you talk, the things that you say at the end of your paragraph, right before your mouth closes, will hit the buttons on the jukebox, and my next question will come out. Now, it may have been a question that I had was prepared, or maybe I have to invent music on the spot just because you made me curious, and a whole new record comes out, never heard before, but this is a new question just because I'm curious. So what happens then is now listening sets in because I need to be listening like my ears are as big as satellite dishes in order for me to know what the next question is going to be. Now, if I had my questions written down on the pad, I wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to listen because I would say, okay, question 4.
Yep.
All right, question 5. And what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And
I'm gonna do a revolutionary act right now, and I'm just gonna rip.
it's ripping up his
They're right here.
questions.
They're here, and there are a lot of good ones. I have a lot of good ones right here. This is terrifying to me right now.
No, I want you to just look them over. Take a second,
Okay.
look them over.
I'm looking them over.
And just inhale them. Inhale them. There you go.
It's a new art form, but the reason I'm asking you is because I want to learn how to breathe in this way.
Wow.
Right? Like I've heard interviews that breathe, and my desire is to get there. And I feel like I have what I have in my corner is I've been interviewed so many times, and most of them were shitty.
Now, why are those interviews shitty? There's got to be like one core reason.
Yeah, there's a reason.
And there's not like, there's going to be more than one reason, but my question is, if you went across all of them that didn't work, what was the common reason they didn't work?
I'm going to use your quote because I've been researching you. A canned question gets a canned answer.
There you go.
This is it.
That's right.
So you're asking me something that you already know the answer to. God, what are we doing here?
That's right.
Why am I here? And the worst thing is that you'll get them like the phoners. So you're like, I'm walking around in some grocery store or I'm in some city and I have on my calendar that I need to do these 9 interviews in a row, right?
Oh, man.
And so the greatest gift that someone can give me is to do some work beforehand and give me a good question to answer. Because if you ask me a question that it like excites me or is interesting, then I'm not working. This is just fun. Oh my God. Who doesn't like to talk about why they're on the planet? Everybody does. If you give them the right thing. So at least what I can do when I'm getting ready for an interview with someone like you is go like, I know that's terrible. I have a good detector of like, that's a horrible question. For the love of God, do not ask that question. But what I'm asking you and what you're telling me I'm taking in so sweetly is this, and one of my goals for this whole interview is to be like, how do I breathe? Teach me how to make an interview breathe. Because there is something when I'm listening to you, when I look back to the pad to go like, okay, what's the next thing I want to know? There's a block there. It doesn't just breathe the way that it should, you know?
A big part of that, and we just talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A big part of that is allowing the silence to work for you. And maybe you do this in music where when there's too much music involved.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the same thing in cooking. You throw in too many ingredients and it's not the same as when you hit it with the simplest touch that makes it work. Everybody understands it. There's no murkiness. And then it breathes on its own. Really, there's a huge overlap between the creation of music and interviewing, I think. I just don't know I've never really created music to understand it. I'm just feeling it from so many of the musicians and the composers I've talked to. And to give you kind of an overlap of what you were going through when you had the 9 interviews scheduled back to back to back.
Yeah.
I remember Bernie Taupin, who wrote the lyrics for like Elton John's hits.
Awesome.
So he basically came up with the words. I don't know if you know the backstory between those two guys. Like he's the guy who composed Rocket Man.
Whoa.
And so, and I'll tell you a little story about that because this is something that will never happen now because of the technology. So he lived in sort of the Idaho of England when he was a kid. That's where his parents lived. And after he became very successful, he is driving back home to see his mom and dad. And it's nighttime, and he's driving along, and he starts to hear the words to Rocket Man in his head. It's 9 a.m., pre-flight, and he realizes there's something here. I got to do something. And he reaches to the glove compartment looking for a pencil and paper. There's nothing there. And now he's like rummaging around the car because the words are coming to him.
Yeah.
And he's not hearing Rocket Man because he doesn't have any music. It's just words he's hearing. So he just got to get these words down, but he's in the middle of nowhere and he's got no way to record it. And so he just keeps driving, trying to repeat these words over and over and over. And then he pulls up to the place where his folks lived. And I guess they had heard him coming. They came out to the front porch or whatever. And he just ran by them. Didn't even say hello to get to his pen and paper to write down the words. And that is like pure creativity. And now Elton then gets these words, and then his genius was to take the words and to put a melody to them and then sing them in a way that everybody would remember. And that was their, Daniel, my brother, it's all those songs came from the words from Bernie's head. Wow. And if there would have been not one, the other, we would have never heard of Reg Dwight. Yeah. Well, you never heard of Reg Dwight because he changed it to Elton John. But they met almost by coincidence because Bernie was trying to get somebody to see that he could be a songwriter, except he couldn't write the music. And meanwhile, Elton's playing covers, and he has no fresh material. And a guy basically told Bernie, there's this guy named Reg Dwight. You ought to go see him. And when they came together, boom.
It's amazing.
Put it together. So the reason I just set that up so everybody would understand who Bernie is that he often would be interviewed. And I don't know if it was 9 times a day like what you're going through, but he rebelled against it.
Okay.
It just got to the point where he was so frustrated with these same questions that in order to stay creative, he would just start inventing different stories to the same question. So
I love this.
So in that, I don't know if he was doing 9 a day, but if a few people called him the same day and asked him the same question, they got completely disconnected, different stories. And that's because, to your point, people ask canned questions. And it's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to ask a question that is going to stop somebody from thinking.
Mm.
If you can't make the person, all right, here's the biggest lesson.
Okay.
The best questions make the person asked just as curious about the person, just as curious as you are, the questioner.
Yeah.
So I ask you a question. I want you to be maybe more curious about the answer than I am, and I ask you the question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
That's a good question. It's a whole art.
It definitely is an art that I never really even looked into until the last couple of years when I started to speak. Mm. And then when I started to speak afterward, everybody started asking me questions. Well, how do you do it? What's your magic question? No, I'm sorry. There's no magic question. But this is how I do it. And it's only these speeches that have taught me what an art it is. I guess it's not much different where if after a concert you had your audience maybe if it was at a small club, stick around, and then had them be able to ask you any questions about
We do it before the show.
how did you create that?
And your answers are way more, it's hard because the answers that I give tend to be there's no perfect question, right? Like you give I find myself the answers to the questions of like, I'm an artist, how do I do it? And my answers are very like.
But that's not a good question.
Totally. Bad question. The vagueness of my answers, like
the vagueness.
Try forever, don't ever give up. Just like
see, the vagueness of your answer corresponded to the vagueness of the question.
Okay.
Now, if they would have said, "All right, fresh eyes," what compelled you to go to that homeless shelter to create that video? What was the moment that you thought, man, what if I went into that homeless shelter and just got a look at the people who were living there? I don't know how that happened. I want to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a much, much better question.
No, because now, look, we have no idea where this is going to go, because maybe you can tell me a story that goes back to the days where you were busking on the 3rd Street in Santa Monica and you met some homeless guy or whatever. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea what brought you there. And I have no idea how you had the concept to shoot that video so we would see these people like as they were in their bunk beds, all crammed in, and then to give them a makeover, and then to have them walk outside after their makeover to like a standing ovation and see their faces so that we could all see, wow, imagine if we can all look at these people with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Now, there had to be moments that made that all happen. I have no idea. I want to know.
Yeah. My new thing when someone asks me that question, I'll be like, that's a bad question. Your first, let me tell you first how to be an artist is don't ask shitty questions like that.
Well, maybe it's as simple as saying, do you know what? Could you be a little more detailed with that question?
Yeah.
What was it that you're really curious about? Is there a song that particularly strikes you that...
Man, the thing you said earlier, which is so good, is the vagueness of my answer is coming from the vagueness of your question. That's so true.
The better the question, the better your answer is going to be.
I think this is not just wisdom to take if you're interviewing. This is like life. This is if you're sitting next to someone at dinner. Like, get in. You know what I mean?
1,000,000%. I interviewed this guy. It was an amazing interview. It was at a conference. His name is Frank Blake. He's now the chairman of the board of Delta Airlines. He was the CEO at Home Depot during an incredible surge. But he started out as a lawyer. And then he went on to politics. He worked with George H.W. Bush, not when Bush was president, but when Bush was vice president for Ronald Reagan. Also worked for Jack Welch, who's kind of a legendary CEO at General Electric. And so he basically had a chance to watch how questions were used in all these different areas. And what was fascinating to me, and if there was one podcast that on big questions that I would recommend you listen to, it's that one, because...
What's his name again?
His name is Frank Blake.
Frank Blake, okay.
And because I've just started asking him about his history with questions. Now, he used questions when he got to be CEO of Home Depot in a way that lifted the whole company. But as he told me, up until that point, he saw questions in a very different light. In business, questions are often used to make you uncomfortable. In law, completely.
Oh, yeah.
Closed questions, yes or no. Because they are basically not trying to open things up so that everybody can understand the full picture. They are trying to close and winnow something down so that jury only sees the story that lawyer wants them to see.
Mm-hmm.
So legal questions are yes, no, black, white. There's no middle ground here.
Yeah.
And so his whole life, he looked at questions as something to keep a distance from. Because if you're in a business and somebody started asking you questions, or certainly in politics, and he tells this story where he was being interviewed by a committee of like senators, or it might have been representatives. I can't remember, so I don't want to try and be specific. But right before the interview started, this politician came up to him and said, we saw that, like, you said this about this particular subject. And he said, oh, yeah, I really feel strongly about that. And the politician said, great, I'm going to ask you about that. And so he gets up on the stand. Politician asks him about it, and he reaffirms, that's exactly the way I feel. So he steps off the stand, walks outside. By the time he gets outside, there are press releases already aimed at him saying, this is exactly what we don't want.
Yeah.
So the question had just set him up. So he looked at questions in many ways as, all right, how are they trying to trick me or get me? Whereas, and that's why it was such a fascinating conversation to me, because I only saw questions as a way to help people understand themselves and the world around them in a better way. So it's like pure goodness as opposed to using them to manipulate or hurt. And if there is a criticism that could be leveled at my style of interviewing is, some people may deserve to be put on the grill. But even then, I never try to grill anybody. And a lot of times, it's funny, you talk about canned questions and canned answers and canned phrases. Like, people will describe Cal as an interviewer, and he's grilled all these people. I haven't grilled anybody.
Yeah.
I want to understand who they are, how they think through their stories, their past. And I want them to understand themselves better because of those stories and the information that the questions were able to dredge up.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is about not being vague, because I'll bet you can't write any good music being vague.
No, it's got to come. And the best music or songwriting is when a big idea is super personal to you, right? It's like something that would seem vague is actually really specific to you. Did you see the Queen movie?
I love
Holy
that movie.
shit, it's
I
so
love that movie.
good.
Oh,
I'm having
man.
like a crisis in my life of like, do I just need to write music like Queen? When art is that good, it will literally throw me into crisis of like, I think my next album should just be a Queen tribute album.
I am so happy to hear that.
The song that got me is Somebody to Love. Can anybody find me somebody to love?
Right.
That is a huge idea. It's like so vague. If anyone just sings that, it might not hit you. But you watch the movie about Freddie Mercury, and to him, it's like, I need someone to love. That's what the whole movie's about. Is like, find me someone to love. And this big idea is then super specific to him, and we all feel it when it comes through. And it's a smash. It's the best thing we've ever heard. Because we all get it. But it's big and the small at the same time.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
And to me, the genius of that film was to show the creation of this music, and across the board, it gets honed down to the A&R guy who is mocking
Yeah.
the opera. But it's like, what are these words? What are you talking about? Where is this coming from? Galileo, Figaro, and at the end of the movie, all those words made complete sense because they came from an inner place. Remember, we were talking before about kids where they get into crazy places, but then time passes and they can see clearly. When they went up on stage at Live Aid, Freddie Mercury was seeing clearly.
Yeah.
And the songs that had come out of him just because they were there, all of a sudden were more intensely focused than at any other time in his life.
So cool.
Because he understood how many ticks he had left on the clock to perform that song. And so it just made what he created even more and more focused. I'm so glad you love that movie because there's some people, like I've gone to see this multiple times. And I tell people about the movie and then I guess I'm over the top gushing about it. And then they come back and say, yeah, it was okay.
It's okay. Yeah,
Like, what?
What are you crazy?
It was okay.
I do want to, there's something about you that seems fearless in all the stories and the way you've lived your life. Where does that come from? Have you always just been like not afraid to ask the question? Is there an inner thing in you that goes like, I have to ask the question, even if this is going to get me in trouble, or I have to do that thing? Are you like an adrenaline junkie? What the hell is going on?
Very different, very different. Number one, and this is what I'm talking about. Like when you start asking me a question like this, it forces me to think of the artistic process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was really curious about something and maybe I knew, you know what, if I ask that question, it's going to make this person a little uncomfortable. And I was fearless and just ran in and started the interview with that question, that interview would be put on the wrong tracks and crash almost immediately. Or if it didn't crash, it would take me 30 minutes to 45 minutes to go in, repair the damage, and take it down the tracks I need to. So a lot of it, and I don't know if it's the same with music, but in an interview, it comes down to trust. Now, maybe you need the audience to trust you in some way that I would never understand because I've never been on stages as a musician. But I know in an interview, every time I ask another question, I am giving the subject an opportunity to trust me more. And so I am not going to ask that question that might hit a raw nerve immediately. Like, where's this guy going?
Sure.
What does he want from me?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I am going to be afraid to ask that question at the start. But I'm going to slowly gain trust. And then after 15 minutes, I'm going to be trusted more than I was in the first minute. And by 30 minutes, and maybe this is like the way it is in a concert, you're building and building and building to the point where when you get to your finale, everybody should be going nuts and not wanting it to end.
Yeah.
And that's where I ask that question.
But I mean, just in your life, though. Like, okay, so that I could see not like using fear correctly in an interview, but in your life, you have done so many insane things.
I have done a lot of.
You've traveled for 10 years, right?
Right.
You like is there a word for a description for a reporter that does the thing and then reports on it? Because I haven't heard too many people that do what you do.
Yeah, there was a guy.
If people haven't heard of you before, he swum with sharks. There's like gorilla stuff. You fought Julio Cesar Chavez.
When he was 87 wins and no losses.
You like actually got into the ring, did a full round with him.
Yeah, a couple of rounds.
Yeah, you've done, your life story has this element of like, I'll do it, even if it seems a little dangerous or scary or hard or whatever. That's what I'm trying to get after.
Yeah, no, that's
like,
true.
Where does this piece come from?
I think it doesn't come from, let me show the world how fearless I am.
Sure.
It comes from maybe the same way you find the inspiration for your music. Something will happen. I'll give you an example. I just did a Spartan obstacle race.
You did?
Yeah. It's called the Beast.
Okay.
So they have what's called the trifecta. There's a sprint, which is about 3.5 miles. They do them in stadiums. They do them outside stadiums too, but in the stadiums, you're running like up and down the steps through the clubhouse. It's really cool. And you're seeing the ballpark in a way you never will see it as a fan. You're inside the park, but when you get into the clubhouse, you may have to do like 30 burpees. And there are rope climbs and there's walls to jump over. And that's sort of your basic induction into Spartan. Then you go up to a super, and this is outdoors. This is 8 miles, and you're climbing ropes. You're jumping over walls. You're on a rig called a twister where you're hanging by your hands, and like in a movie where you've got to get from one side to the other without falling. And you really have to be able to like hold yourself up by your hands for at least more than a minute if you're really strong to just shoot through it. But if you're not that strong, you actually need more time and more strength. It's kind of a crazy thing, and I'm just sort of dealing with it now. But like I can hang by my hands for more than a minute now.
Good.
So basically, you graduate from the sprint, to the super, and then you get to the Beast, which was 14 miles with, I think there were 36 obstacles. There's something in the 30s. And where I just did it was Spartanburg, South Carolina. They had 5 days of rain, so it was like through mud. So it was basically what you would expect out of a military boot camp.
Sure.
And it took me like 7 hours to get through this thing. And I'll show you a picture. You look at it, and everybody's like, well, are you nuts? I'm just, at the end, just like coated with mud. And right before the end, there is, like, you're constantly walking through streams, but there's one place where you have to go completely underwater, and it's like the dunk, they call it, and then go under a wall. It's placed in the middle of this pit of water, and then come out the other side. And at that point, you're completely covered in mud, and your feet and your sneakers are like, when you step down, you can almost hear that sogginess, and you're stuck. And then they have this huge wall that you've got to climb up using a rope. They call it the slippery wall. And it's like, with all the mud, like you have no traction. And so you're relying, after 7 hours of these grueling obstacles, you've got to pull yourself up by the rope while your feet are kind of giving out on you. And I did it. And I learned a lot about myself doing it. And one of the things that I learned was, at mile 10, I felt better than I did at the start. Wow. And I realized, oh my God, this is addictive. Just putting one foot in front of the next, in front of the next, in front of the next. I don't want to stop. I could do this again.
Wow.
Now, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of eating donuts. You start eating a donut, you want to have another.
Oh, yeah.
And another, and another. And I realized that this obstacle course, we got the Big E here. We got the Big E.
So, what
I
you guys
know my
can't
man
see-
loves his donuts.
No, me and E-Man go hard on donuts. That's a whole thing. You don't want to see us with a box of donuts.
Oh, I do want to see you all with a box of donuts,
it's
man.
quite a rough experience.
Hey, man, do you want to like get involved with Spartan and
Always down for something.
Yeah?
I've actually lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I was massive.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? You might love this
Hit me.
because you will be able to, I hope, if you get to that point where I was in that beast, realize this is the opposite of the donuts. And
It's the opposite.
it's a polar opposite. One is the South Pole, one's the North Pole. So it becomes a question of which pole do I want to live on? Because I can turn my mind to see getting up a rope or doing 30 burpees or getting through mud
Whoa.
into eating a donut. I just got to make a choice which addiction I'm going to choose.
That's real.
And that's what I've done in the last year. And now I am telling you, I've completely changed my diet habits.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've lost how much weight?
I lost like 30.
Wow.
And probably more is going to come off because I'm only, as I was explaining before, I went into this not, hey, I'm fearless. I mean, that was the problem. The guy's a Spartan, and the CEO of the company basically took me on as his own pet project.
Okay.
And we're filming a documentary about it. So it's kind of like The Odd Couple, because I was not the fearless guy
Sure.
that said, let's go. In fact, I treated it the opposite way. I did not want to be the guy who was trying to beat somebody up a hill. I just wanted to be out there and moving at my own pace. And it drove him nuts because he wanted me to be Spartan.
Yeah.
He wanted me to be a type A personality. And there was a scene where toward the end of the doc, we go to steps that are in Culver City. I don't know if you've ever been at those Culver City steps.
I don't think I have.
Okay, so it's you've been there, E-Man has, where you're going, basically climbing a big hill on these steps. And at this point, I am a long way from the person who started. I've taken the 30 pounds off. I can get up the steps.
Yeah.
And so I start going up the steps, and the cameras are filming this. And there are people walking up the steps that are in my way. And I basically had a choice. Was I going to just slow down and calmly wait for the people to move and then go around them when I could? But at one point, I was just moving, and there was this person in front of me, and I just said, like, I'm coming through here. And I tripped and went down head first. I caught myself, but my glasses flew off and cracked down the middle.
Oh.
And it was this symbolic moment of, is that really what you wanted to become, Cal?
Mm.
Is that what this was about? And I actually, like you could tell the camera guys were wanting me to like step on the glasses and just keep
going.
going as if like, prove it, you're Spartan now. And I just stopped and pondered this like Socrates would have, that was really what came out of this, because there were the Athenians who like thought like Socrates and questioned and allowed you to be educated in the way you thought might be good. And there were the Spartans who basically had this military regimen. When you were a kid, you were put in this system and you were a man then, and you fought to the death. So they were trying to turn me from Socrates into a Spartan. And the cameraman is just like, okay, where's my shot? I need you like running up to top of the mountain. I just stopped and I just pondered and asked myself a question. You could just see on his face like, oh shit, I didn't get what I wanted. And my point was, that really was the most authentic thing
Part of the whole thing, yeah.
that I could do, was just stop and say, is this really who I am? I'm happy that I now can zoom up those steps, but do I really need to pass people? That's not me. I don't try to be. And I had this conversation with Kobe Bryant on my podcast, where I went in to interview him, and I was wondering how this is going to go, because everything about Kobe is, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah.
And everything about me is, this is not a competition. And it actually worked out great, because what Kobe told me was that everything he did started with curiosity.
Oh, interesting.
We think it started with competitiveness, but no, it started with curiosity. And then the curiosity and the competitiveness came together. How do I be more competitive? But how can I be better than I was last season? What pieces do I have to put into this puzzle? And it was the curiosity that pushed it, that enabled the competitiveness. And so we really had a great overlap.
Cool.
But at the end of this film, I came away a little more balanced, because I'm understanding, you know what? And part of the Spartan regimen is you gotta like throw spears like into the target. And if you miss the target, or if you don't hit the target, then you gotta do 30 burpees. And so you can imagine, if there are 30 obstacles and every obstacle you fail, you gotta do 30 burpees as punishment. You know, you're running 14 miles and now you're gonna add like thousands of burpees.
Yeah.
This will really take it out of you. And at the end of this, I realized, I don't want to lose. Like, Socrates is who I am. I'm never going to be able to stray away from that. But on the other hand, I do like the idea that I can move up the steps pretty quick now. And I do like the idea that if I need to pick up a spear and hit the target in the middle, I can do that.
Yeah.
So it took me, and it's taken me to a balanced place. And this is not something that is ending with the last race. Yeah. I'm going to do this for a long time, because I realize that it has a lot of the things that I'm missing.
Yeah.
So was it fearlessness that took me into it? No, it was the fact that I was 30 pounds overweight. And here's what happened. I interviewed like a dozen guys and girls, men and women, who were like 600 pounds and had gotten down to 200 or less.
Wow.
And every one of them, when you listen to their stories, had this one aha moment. Like, for instance, there was one guy, he had to be more than 400 pounds. He was driving his car, and the car got into a really bad accident, and he had to get out of the car, and he didn't know if he could. There's another guy, this is a great story, who came up as an athlete, but then he was always a little heavy, and he went up to dunk the ball, And because I guess he had so much weight, he like destroyed his knee during this dunk. And when that happened, it basically made him sedentary for a while. And then he just started eating and eating, eating. He was always the big guy, but because he was athletic, he balanced it out. But then when he became sedentary, he just kind of started eating and eating and eating. And he got to a place where he was huge, which enabled him to become a bodyguard. You need a body. You're going on tour. You need a bodyguard. Who are you looking for? You're looking for the biggest ass guy who nobody's gonna mess with.
Yeah.
Right. And so now this bodyguard is traveling on tour, and you would know this as well as anyone because he was with musicians, he was with comedians, and you're going from place to place. There were a lot of stops at 3 a.m. at like convenience stores. You get gas, you go in, and you eat the worst kind of food. And he's just becoming huger and huger, which makes him look like a better bodyguard because he is massive.
Yeah.
Right. So he's with a comedian, and they're in a hotel suite, and there are about 50 people in the room. And they both love basketball, both the bodyguard and the comedian. And they're watching a game, and they have different sides. And so they want to bet on the outcome. Well, what are you going to bet? And they're just joking. All right, loser does 100 push-ups. Okay, fine. Loser does 100 push-ups. Well, the bodyguard's team loses, right? So the bodyguard's got to get down and do 100 push-ups. Now there are 50 people in the room, right? Gets down, can't do one. Now, there's a comedian. There's a comedian there. There's just won the bet. And 50 people who are poised to laugh. And that set this bodyguard on a route to lose all this weight and help others lose weight.
Mm.
And what I realized was every one of these people had an aha moment where they realized if I don't do something now, I'm going to be screwed. I'm dead. I'm just not going to be here very long. So I got to do it. And every one of them, once they had that moment, the next day, in their own way, they figured it out.
Yeah.
And after talking to these 12 people, I realized, you know what? I am not going to have that aha moment. I'm only like 30 pounds overweight. Nobody's looking at me like, oh, Cal, you might really want to watch what you're eating. No, I look normal. And when I realized I'm not going to have an aha moment, I realized I almost had
aha moment.
That was my aha moment. That's it. That's exactly it. It's that was a moment that I realized I got to do something.
Wow.
And that's the moment that I met Joe DeSena, who was the CEO of Spartan. And he was completely up to making an aha moment out of it.
Yeah.
But like I fought him every step of the way because I am not fearless. I would get up 3/4 of the way of the rope and I would know, all right, I got a choice. I can gut this out and get to the top. Or I can think about this and realize I can gut this out, get to the top, but once I get to the top, there's not going to be anything left in my arms to get down. Now, what if I fall and now I'm out of commission for 3 weeks? And so I just stopped 3/4 of the way and then came down. And people look at it and they say, well, he's a loser. He's not a Spartan. And so I'm going through this the whole way. Now, I got to say, the one thing, and E-Man, if you come into Spartan, the best thing about it is the people are so positive. Nobody will ever put you down. They will always try and lift you up. And when I mean lift you up, I mean they will literally lift you over 8-foot walls. They will get you there. It may take like a dozen people, but they will get you to the other side because that's the whole code. It's like a tribe of people that is just designed to get the best out of everybody's bodies.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So it just kind of it debunks the whole way of looking at life as Cal's this fearless guy who just rushes into these situations. And I do go, but I go with my questions. And my questions often tell me, you know what? You're not getting to the top of the rope today.
Yeah.
It's going to take you another 2 weeks.
Interesting.
And so I also realize, you point a time out where I swam over an 18-foot tiger shark. So, and there's no cage, it's just me. And the tiger sharks are notorious for eating anything. I mean, when they've fished some of these out of the ocean, they've opened them up and found like suits of armor from the medieval days. Jeez. Tiger sharks will eat anything. And so I was writing a story about sharks because it's a big misconception. Everybody thinks of sharks in terms of jaws. You go to the beach, there's a chance you're going to get eaten alive. But the fact is, at that time, this was in the early 90s, men were killing like 90 million sharks a year. It was like the sharks were the ones who should have been sitting in a movie theater watching what was going on. Yeah. And so I just became very curious about like the life of a shark. And to the point where I want to know like what it felt like to be a shark. I wanted to feel a shark because I heard that their coating was like sandpaper. And so I went to the Bahamas, and there was a team of scientists there that studied the sharks, and they were delighted to have me. And they said, Cal, this is going to be beautiful. You're really going to have an experience here because we are in water that's not very deep. And what we do to study the sharks is we go fishing and we catch them. And then once the shark is just got the hook in it, it's just going to fight and fight and fight to get away from the hook. And we let the shark fight like for hours and hours and hours, like all night long. So that by the next day, when we go down, the shark is just kind of tired and it's just not in any mood to mess with us.
To eat you,
Yeah.
Okay.
So trust us, Cal. Trust us. You can go down and you don't even have to dive. You can snorkel. We'll give you a snorkel. You just load up on air and you'll be able to swim down to the shark. They get close to it. Maybe if you want to touch it, you'll get a chance. And one of the scientists goes in the water with me, and then he basically waves like, "There's a shark. Okay, have at it."
Yep.
And so I'm looking at the shark, and I know it's on a line, and it looks kind of sedentary. It looks almost like it's sleeping. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, it's only going to be a few seconds. And I get it lower and lower and lower. And then I'm on this tiger shark is like 3 to 4, like 3 times my size. And now I'm laid out like over its back. And I'm like, man, look at the size of this sucker. And now I'm putting my hands on its back. And man, it's like sandpaper. Wow. And all of a sudden, I see the head of this shark turn, and it's like looking me in the eye saying, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah.
You fucking with me? The next thing I know, everything goes like completely murky because you got to realize this was in shallow water. So when the shark started to thrash and come like toward me, like all the sediment and stuff that's at the bottom just comes up, and now it's like I can't even see anything. I'm just like trying to get to the surface. Help,
Abort.
yeah, exactly. The next time I tell a story, I'll use that abort.
Yeah.
That's good. That's the great thing about storytelling. You know, you hear something, and maybe like music, you hear something that works.
Yeah.
Okay,
Steal
yeah,
it.
just
Steal it.
yeah.
Of
Or
course.
no, I'm paying homage.
Of course.
And you know, I get up to the surface, I'm gasping, but you know, the realization was that shark wasn't pinned down.
Yeah.
It was just fighting against. It was just tired.
Yeah.
It could have turned on me, and if it had gotten a chance, just with one bite, just
Done.
eating me like a sandwich.
It's amazing.
So that's a time where I don't know that was fearlessness as much as stupidity. But you know what? I got the abort story.
What I like about what you're saying, what I'm taking most from my question of fearlessness is that it's mostly curiosity.
Yes, that's
Which
true.
is a more grounded place, which I like. Okay, I have some questions to ask the question guy. These are my favorite questions.
Okay.
This whole podcast started because my favorite thing is to sit around a dinner table and ask someone this question. A couple of these questions. What's the most spiritual experience you've ever had?
Walking through the redwoods in Northern California.
Mm.
And you just see the size of those trees and know how much longer they've been on the planet that you have, what they've seen, what they've breathed, what they've exhaled. The whole experience makes you realize how small you were. All of them were completely natural, being in the middle of the Sahara Desert and seeing the stars. They ain't like our stars here, I guarantee you. They're the same stars, but there's no pollution there.
Yeah.
So you are seeing the stars the way people saw those stars thousands of years ago.
So nature.
Yeah, I think it always is going to come back to a sense of nature that just made me realize how small I am.
Mm. What is a great thing? What is a terrible thing about money?
Great thing about money is having a lot of it.
Okay.
Terrible thing about money is not having any of it. But you know what? I'll tell you a story, because that answer is an answer that I would not have given you 30 years ago when I started to travel. Because, and I'll never know because I didn't have a lot of money when I travel. And often when I tell the story of traveling, the reason that I was able to have such an adventure was because of 4 words. I didn't have any money. So this put me in a position to, as I'm traveling around, I would get on or go into bus stations or train stations, and I would buy a ticket to the next destination. Now, if I had money, I probably would have sat around. If I had money, or I was in a job where I was making money and I had to get back to it, what would have happened is I would have said, okay, what are the 4 things I've got to see? And how am I going to allot my time to get to those 4 things? All right, what trains am I going to take? What restaurants am I going to eat at? And planned out the whole thing. Where, because I didn't have money, I would get on trains And I certainly didn't have enough money to spend night after night in hotels. So I'd get on the train and I would have to look for an empty seat next to somebody, not a compartment of all empty seats. I needed a specific seat next to somebody who looked interesting, somebody who looked like they could trust me and that I could trust. Because once I found that person next to that empty seat, I would go to that seat and pretty soon the train would start rolling and a conversation would get started. And by the end of that conversation, by the end of that ride, I needed that person to invite me home. Otherwise, I had no roof over my head. And so not having money in that situation actually enabled me to learn how to connect with people in a way that helped me when I went in to interview Robert De Niro or Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson, or I'm trying to think, Art Garfunkel from Simon and Garfunkel, and Merle Haggard, and Bruce Springsteen. It's very interesting. I only got a chance to talk to Bruce Springsteen for a few minutes, and I was able to write like an 8-page story off of that conversation. And I think part of it was because I was able to connect so quickly and get to like a very deep place. And then people who were his fans actually like wrote letters and sent emails saying, my God, we never, all these years of reading about him, we never got that information. And it was done in a very short period of time. And I think I attribute it to my days of traveling when I had to make connections with people quick, or maybe it wasn't particularly quick, but maybe we weren't speaking the same language. And now you're dealing with tone of voice, body language. You're going to some deep places there.
Yeah.
And so not having the money gave me a sense of vulnerability that made people wanted to invite me to their homes. If I had the money and I could stay at a hotel, they wouldn't have brought me into their homes. I never would have had those experiences. And I can remember getting on a bus in Rio de Janeiro, and there are a lot of homeless kids there. And I got like a little money with me. It was not much at all. And I'm wearing short pants and a t-shirt, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow, this is amazing. I'm a free man. I'm not going to work like so many other people. And I can feel happy because I know so many other people are not happy going into their jobs. Right now, I have a little money and I'm free, and I'm in Rio de Janeiro. And I don't know if I'm going to meet the woman of my dreams in 2 minutes, but I'm on my way. And all I got on is my shoes, short pants, and a t-shirt. I'm feeling incredibly light and free, right? Next thing I know, and in Rio, you would come on the bus in the back, and there would be a turnstile, and there would be a guy by the turnstile, and you would pay and then go through the turnstile. And like 5 of these homeless kids like scurry on the bus, and they manage to like distract and get past the guy by the turnstile and go underneath it. And they all sit down and they're laughing like, ha ha, we did it. And I looked over at them and I thought, wow, man, they're freer than me. And they had no money.
Yeah.
And so I think that getting back to where the conversation started with the birth of my son, that question has been flipped around so that my answer is completely different. Back then, not having money was a great thing. Having money that might have influenced my life and told me where I have to go for 10 hours a
Ooh.
day, that would have been a
You are-
disaster.
You are making a good run at the best answer to this question so far.
right.
I always love it. The money thing, everybody has a really good answer to, but this is really wonderful.
But you get to a point where you've got kids in college,
Yeah.
and now you're not supposed to be free. Unless, look, I suppose I could have just told my kids early on, nothing's given to you in this world.
Yeah.
You get out of high school, you figure out a way to get yourself to college. There's a lot of parents who do that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Probably would have been a good way of educating them and letting them know, when they're 7th grade, you know what? Maybe I ought to start saving up for this.
Yeah.
But, my take on it was, my parents put me through school. I'm going to put my kids through school. And so money becomes important.
Yeah.
And you got to pay attention to it. And I'm not as good as paying attention to that as I am toward what's the next story.
Yeah.
That's what I really want.
That's what I really want. Yeah.
That's what I really want. Maybe that's the same thing with music, where, what's the next song?
Yeah.
As opposed to how much money is that song going to get me?
Totally. Oh,
That
man.
would-
Yeah, I'm screwed if you do that.
And Quincy Jones said, the moment you say that, the music walks right out of the room.
Yeah. I've felt it walk out of the room. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way around it.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting question, because you'll get different answers at different stages of life. And I imagine if you're asking me when I'm 90 and maybe had only a day left, I might answer completely different, because I have no need for it. Or maybe in that one day, I'd have a need for a lot of it. And I'd want to do something with it. So that is a beautiful question, because the answer is going, at least from my experience, be very flexible.
Very flexible.
Now, there are some people who may go their whole life. I mean, think of it. Imagine if you were working in a field, like you're on Wall Street, right? But you had the same passion for it that you have for music,
Sure.
right? And so you get up and you're just as open to creating something great, only you're measuring yourself by how much money I'm accumulating. Imagine how much money you could accumulate that way.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's really wild.
Interesting.
If you took your passion and just said, my passion is just to collect money the way you might collect toothpicks and just stack them up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feel great seeing that stack of toothpicks or the stack of bills get higher and higher. You just got to be wired that way.
Yeah.
The guy who created CNN, Ted Turner, told Larry King, it's not about the money, but I'm competitive in a way that makes me want to have more toothpicks. So whatever it is,
Yeah.
I'm going to want to have more.
So good.
Good question.
Great. I think honestly, that's a great place to end. That was one of the best answers to that money question I've ever heard.
Yeah, and you're going to have a hard, I was going to say, your next question would have a hard time
Beating that. Let's listen.
Yeah.
That's it. This
All
was a
right.
wonderful, wonderful interview. I will have probably learned the most from this. I just want to say thank you I plan on doing this for a really long time, and for helping me become a better interviewer. I thank you, and I think the ears of everyone that listens or watches this will thank you as well.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm so grateful, and we're going to get the E-Man over to Spartan. And man, the E-Man.
Honestly, you need to get me
You
as
wanna come
well.
to Spartan too?
Listen, let's do it. Let's all do it together.
Oh,
And you as
man.
well.
Look at this.
It's on film.
It's on.
So we're
It's
screwed.
filmed, and
Yeah.
okay. You know what?
Let's eat some donuts first, though. Peace. Thank you so much, Cal. I love you, buddy.
Oh, brother.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Tell me your story, but don't leave the good parts out.